I am wondering, what is your favorite meal? Now, you can answer that question however you would like, whether that's a specific food that you love eating, or whether it's a particular traditional meal eaten in your family. Maybe you love an Easter meal or a holiday meal. Or maybe it's a favorite, one really specific meal, the one you ate that one time at a specific restaurant when you were on vacation. What is your favorite meal? If I had to pick a favorite food, I would tell you about my mom's enchiladas. I've gotten her recipe several times, but they're just putsy enough that I never quite sit down to put them together. And even when I do, they don't taste the same. Something about being made with mom's love just makes them a little different. By the way, since I'm preaching, I get to answer all 3 questions. Aren't you excited? If I were to tell you about a favorite holiday meal, I would tell you about Christmas dinner. Did you know on my dad's side of the family, we eat spaghetti every year for Christmas? I didn't even know people ate turkey or ham for Christmas. I thought that was strange. But it turns out when my grandparents were first married 60-some years ago, they didn't have money for a big fancy meal. So they made spaghetti. And every year since, for over 60 years, they, and then their children, followed by their grandchildren, eat spaghetti on Christmas. And I wouldn't have it any other way. It's a reminder that you don't always need a whole lot to celebrate. So often, it's the little things in life that end up meaning the most. Now, I do have a memory of a very specific, I guess we'll call it a meal. It was some years ago, my husband and I went on vacation with his siblings, their families, and then his parents. And we spent this long weekend at a resort near Bemidji. And nearby, there was this little tiki hut restaurant that sold really cheap but really delicious tacos. So one day, my husband and I end up down at this little tiki hut, and we're eating tacos. And it turns out that everyone in his family had the same idea, because pretty soon, all of the siblings and his parents all ended up there eating. Well, this became a daily tradition, and as the days came by, we'd all get a text, "It's time for Tiki Hut tacos." And soon we would all be there eating, or maybe some of us forewent tacos that day, but we would all sit there and eat by the lake, talking about the fun and adventures of another day. It's sometimes these little details, these little things in life that end up meaning the most to us. Now, I wonder if this story, this gospel lesson for today with Jesus, was a favorite meal for somebody. I imagine it was memorable at the very least. I guess I don't know if bread or fish was anyone's favorite food, but can you imagine? It seems they started with practically nothing, thousands of people and no food, and Jesus feeds everyone. And then there's leftovers. It's pretty amazing. I think I like to imagine the story this way. I imagine that Jesus is exhausted, having just learned news of his cousin's death. He's trying to get away for some alone time, and he leaves. But he's already so popular that the people follow him on foot, often walking miles from their homes to hear him and see what he will do next. And so it's late in the day, Jesus' dreams of peace and quiet have been shattered, and that's when the disciples come with what I would expect to be good news. Time to send the people home for supper. So you might think this is good news, but that doesn't seem to be what's on Jesus' mind. Jesus always knows the needs of his people, and so he makes a rather unanticipated choice. Instead of sending the people home, he just turns to the disciples and says, "Well, you feed them." I wonder how much their anxiety jumped in that moment. Did you hear the size of the crowd? 5,000 men. 5,000 men, and then we need to add in women and children. Some of the best estimates of this story are 8 or 10 or even 15,000 people. 15,000 people, and Jesus just casually says, "Yeah, you go feed them." I can't even feed 8 for Thanksgiving, much less 15,000 people. I wonder if the disciples are looking in their bank account saying, "Yeah, Jesus, there's not enough in there. I can guarantee that." And so instead, they're like, "Well, okay, Jesus, here's a couple of walleye, here's a few loaves of Wonder Bread, but that's it. That's all we've got." And then from this really small offering, when the disciples offered what little they had, Jesus turned it into a feast for thousands. Jesus has this incredible ability to take a little and turn it into a lot. So when I read this story, I can't help but think of a scarcity mindset, which is this fancy term for that ever-present feeling that says, I don't have enough or I will never have enough. When was the last time you had that thought? Because I feel like often it follows us too closely these days. In all the conversations I hear about money or inflation, for so many, it feels like any margin they had is slowly disappearing. And it's not just money. Just all too easily, it feels like we don't have enough time or energy or health or safety, enough knowledge, enough certainty, enough confidence to know that we can move forward. And to be fair, when you don't have enough of the right things, life is so much harder. So sure, a little thing like spaghetti for Christmas or tacos on a beach can feel like this huge and happy memory, but a little bit of fear can all too quickly feel like a lot as well. It's amazing how often a little becomes a lot. So how quickly do we have the response of the disciples, or at least maybe sometimes I do, when Jesus points to some need in the world and says, well, you give them something to eat? How often do we say, no way, I don't have enough for that? Fear has a mysterious way of making us think that the little that we have will never be enough. But with Jesus, that's just not true. From 5 loaves of bread and 2 fish, Jesus feeds thousands of people. Jesus is a professional at taking a little and turning it into a lot. In fact, this is a theme we find all over the Bible. Mark chapter 12 tells of a woman who comes to the temple. Essentially, she comes to church, and you can tell from her clothes, and I'm guessing by her smell, she does not have money. And yet, when offering time comes, so to speak, she takes just 2 pennies and puts those in the basket. And Jesus celebrates it, not because it's the size of the gift that was so extraordinary, but because she trusted enough to give even the little that she had. It doesn't matter the size of your faith. Maybe you remember this story. Faith the size of a mustard seed can be enough. God accepts the little that we have because God can do a lot, even with just a little. There's another story in the Old Testament, this time about a single mom who's trying to raise her 2 children, but they've run out of food and they've run out of money, and the debt collectors are on their way. She's in danger of starving. She's in danger of having her children taken away. In this instance, God intervenes through a man named Elisha. Turns out this woman had 1 possession left, just 1 jar of olive oil in the cupboard. And so she is told to go and find as many Tupperware and bowls and cups and mugs, however many containers she can find, and then use her 1 jar of olive oil to fill each one. Now, logically, we know that's not possible. 1 jar of olive oil is just going to make 1 jar more. And so, but as she takes this and pours it into container after container, she fills all of them. She sells all of this extra oil. She pays off her debt. She's able to live off of the extra money. God can do a lot, even if all we have is a little. I think that's the promise of faith. Jesus doesn't promise that we can tackle every problem on our own. In fact, there are many problems we can't ever tackle on our own. God doesn't promise that we can fix every problem, but he promises that he can. And not just that he can, but that he will. And he will use the little that we already have to do it. There's this Tanzanian proverb that says, little by little, a little becomes a lot. And I think this goes for everything in life. A little bit of love and joy has a mysterious way of multiplying and ultimately meaning a lot. And a little bit of fear has this way of snowballing, becoming so large, everything feels scary. But the same thing goes for God too. When we figure out what God is passionate about, and in faith we offer even the little we have for the cause, suddenly a $2 gift feels more like $10. A $10 gift feels more like 100. One life changed can become 10 or 100 or 1,000. When we see what God is up to and join God in God's work, God can take even the smallest offering and turn it into something incredible. And that little act of giving has a way of changing our lives for the better too. God doesn't ask us to have all the answers. He doesn't even ask that we have entire solution. He just asks that we offer the little we have and then promises to take a little and turn it into a lot. I think about these disciples. They ended up offering everything they had, and I wonder if it became a favorite meal for them. And the people gathered there, I wonder about this story. When I was younger, I had this sense that as Jesus took the loaves and fish, he'd offered them up to heaven, and then as he brought it down, maybe there were already 15 loaves and 60 fish in there. And they start passing it out, and as they pass it around, they just magically start multiplying. But I'm starting to wonder if maybe it's even more miraculous that just the people watching saw the disciples gave what they had, and they said, I have something in my pocket too. Maybe I can offer this too. And as the food keeps getting passed, more and more food keeps being added to the mix. It's like this old story about stone soup, where a whole town thinks they have nothing, but when they pool it together, they have enough to feed everyone. Either way is miraculous. And I'm guessing, regardless of that, I'm sure there were people in that crowd who actually had nothing. At the end of the day, everyone gets fed. I think God doesn't discriminate when he offers gifts of blessing, and he's not stingy either. Whether we have a lot or a little, there's always enough of God's love for us all. Maybe that's the miracle that's there. So I want to leave you with a couple of thoughts. Maybe you are in a place in life where you feel like you don't have a lot. Feels like the debt collectors are coming, so to speak, and you don't know how to pay them. Or maybe it's the hospital news that keeps coming, and it's always bad, and you aren't sure which way is up anymore. Whether you are low on money or health or employment or energy or hope, I think back on words I heard from one of our church members. When the future feels uncertain or overwhelming, just keep making the next right step, even if it's a little one. Because little by little, a little becomes a lot, and God has a lot of love for you. But maybe you are in a place this morning where life doesn't feel so hard. Yet you remember those moments where life was difficult, you weren't sure what was coming next, the fears kept snowballing, but you aren't there anymore. I want you to remember that God can take a little and turn it into a lot, but he can take a lot and turn it into even more. So I want you to be thinking, what are the ways that you already give the little that you have, so to speak? Do you give to your church? Do you look for ways to help people in your community or make a lasting impact in the lives of the people around you? Praise the Lord. Celebrate those things. Jesus had an incredible knack for inviting people to his dinner table, people you might not expect, people with sketchy backgrounds, people with nothing. He invited them, he shared with them, and he ate with them. And in doing so, he taught them to give as well. So how can you do the same? It doesn't have to be a lot, but it can be. It doesn't have to be a little, but it can be. Like a little spaghetti that becomes a Christmas tradition, or a little gathering over tacos that becomes a cherished memory. Our God specializes in taking a little and turning it into a lot. And then when we give the little that we have, even if it means we give everything, God promises that there will always be enough left over for everyone.